You're watching the PoliticIt Podcast.
Good evening. Welcome to PoliticIt Podcast. We've got Thaine Fischer with us today. So nice to have you back. We had you a while back.
It's been about 3 years.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk to you again. You know, a lot's happened since then.
Yes.
Let's talk. You know, I know you were on before, but let's talk about you just a little bit. Where'd you grow up? How did you get into this whole gig? And
well, I actually grew up in Montana. My dad moved there when I was really young, so I pretty much spent my entire life in Montana. You know, kind of lived on a ranch, milked cows, did that. I mean, I went to a school that my mom was my first, second, and third grade teacher. It was a 3-room schoolhouse, and our population in Kyla, Montana was 60 people.
Wow.
We didn't live in Kyla. We lived on a ranch. We had about 1,000 acres outside of Kyla, but yeah, that was kind of how I grew up. And then, but my dad ended up getting into the building business. And then I actually, I wrestled in college. So I moved to Wyoming for 2 years. I wrestled at Northwest College in Wyoming. And then I did a spring break in Arizona. And that was the kiss of death for cold weather. I went down to spring break, and it was palm trees and bikinis, and you know, when you're 19 years old, that's pretty alluring.
Yeah.
So
where'd you go there?
I went to DeVry for the first year and a half, and then I transferred. As soon as I got my residency, I transferred into Arizona State.
Okay.
And so I ended up spending.
So Phoenix area.
Yeah, I lived all over Phoenix. I literally started in Tempe at Arizona State, and then after college, moved into the Scottsdale area and moved up to Pinnacle Peak, and then moved down back into Phoenix. And so I was there for 20 years. I started a hospitality company when I was fairly young. I got into real estate, but through my mentor, who was a pretty good sized developer. He was the kind of grandfather. He did Truan North, all the major master plans up in North Scottsdale. And then I started in the hospitality business, and I did that for about 10 years. I sold it, and then met my wife later in life. I got married in my 40s, and so we ended up deciding to get back to the Four Seasons. We looked kind of all over the West. She was from upstate New York, and I, like I said, grew up in Montana, so we wanted to have, we just felt the Four Seasons where we want to raise the kids, and we had went to Park City for a ski trip and skied Snow Basin, and when we saw Snow Basin and skied it, and then we came into Ogden, and next thing you know, it's like, well, we bought a second home up in the valley with 2 other couples, but then after that, we just said, let's move up here. So we bought our first home we bought was in 25th Street in Ogden, or 25th Street in Taylor, up on the bench. And we lived there for about 5-6 years. And then we ended up buying in the valley, and we've had a home in the valley now for 12, 14 years now.
Yeah.
So I've been here about 20 years.
You know, Snow Basin's really a hidden gem in a way. I mean, it's getting a lot better known.
I don't know how much hidden it is now, but it's, I mean, our whole Wasatch, you know, front with the ski resorts, and, you know, we have now 4 really, really solid ski resorts in our backyard.
Yeah.
You know, some of them are, you know, one's private and the other one's semi-private, and Snow Basin's still public. And then we have Nordic Valley, which is an incredible family event. Place, and my kids grew up skiing, learning how to ski at Nordic, just because the cost.
We live right over the pass in North Ogden, and I know that was one of my son's favorite places to go. And
the value proposition to live here is unheard of when you look at all the outdoor amenities we have and access to, you know, literally ski resorts and rivers and reservoirs, and you know, and then Ogden and its historical legacy in downtown 25th Street. There's just a lot of value proposition. So that we decided to make Ogden our home. Yeah. So been here for 20 plus years.
How did you get into this redevelopment area? I think it's interesting because you've got a lot of buildings that have historical significance, and you've been able to repurpose them in a way that I think is you know, outstanding, actually.
You know, when we first moved up here, we were actually looking at the residential side. So there was a tremendous amount of just incredibly beautiful, you know, 1920 to 1940 bungalow homes on the bench. And that's what initially kind of brought us up there, was the residential side. But pretty early on, we decided that we bought a building on Washington that we just said, I want to have an office here, and we did, and we bought one commercial building. And then really the big one that kind of got us addicted to this was the Star Noodle building with the Neon Dragon. Oh. And so we bought that right before the downturn in 2007. So the process of renovating that building was a very long, drawn-out one, and came with a lot of angst, to be honest with you. But once we got through all of that, and we put the sign back up and redeveloped it, and Kirk Dean from Zuka's ended up leasing it for our first tenant. The community response to that was so powerful. It was great. I mean, we had we hosted what we thought was just going to be a small, and there was hundreds of people that showed up to turn on the Neon Dragon, and
right.
Everybody just came out. We got lots of like, hey, it's my first date was here, or this is where I had my, they talked about the food and just how much that building was part of the community fabric, which was just phenomenal. And so that was kind of our first major redevelopment. And these are small projects. I mean, I feel like sometimes when I talk, it's like these aren't massive projects, but over time we've acquired about 14, 15 buildings in the downtown core. We've successfully redeveloped, well, probably 10 to 12 of them now. And the impact that we've seen on these historical buildings has just been phenomenal. So that it really became more, if we can get the community impact, the feel good from that, and make money at it at the same time, we're very blessed.
Well, that building in particular, I mean, you've got the historical charm, but you've got a modern reuse of it without giving up the charm of the building.
And that's kind of what I always smile, because sometimes we'll get credit for these buildings, and really I'm like, the architect that did it 100 years ago should be getting the credit. So Leslie, it's Hodgson, which was one that we've done, and just these buildings have had this look. They just have been boarded up, and really the expertise that I think we brought to is how do we reprogram them? How do we bring them back to life? And so that's really where I feel we've done a great job. Like, the building's been there. It's been there for 100 years.
What was it like walking into that building? Because it didn't look like it does now.
Oh, it was. So it's a hilarious story. There was a city official that introduced me to that. He said, this building's for sale. We were just moved here. We said, hey, if there's any opportunities, we'd like to look at it. He says, I can show you the building, but I can't show it until you have to. The owner, which was the same owner, the Rugens, that had owned it since 1942, I think, and that owner was still there, but she didn't want anybody in the building while she was there. She didn't want to show the building while she was there. So we had to get up at 7 a.m., go look at this building. And I went down there, and I'm walking in, it's dark, my feet are literally sticking to the floor. I mean, it was pretty disgusting. And I could hear noise up above the drop ceiling, and he turned on all the lights, and I looked, and it was a very old restaurant that had not a lot of updates over the last 70 years. Right. And then they took me to the building next door, which was a real estate office that hadn't been used in over a decade. There was probably an inch of dust perfectly formed over where the stapler was, everything. It's like somebody put it in a bottle and just closed it off. And then we went upstairs, and there were hundreds of pigeons flying around, and there was 6 inches of pigeon poop with dead pigeons. And I look at this thing, I'm like, no way, this is disgusting. And I went home. It's like 7:30 in the morning now. I take off all my clothes in the mudroom, and I'm in my underwear walking through the house, and my wife sees me. She's like, what are you doing? And I go, I got to take a shower. Because all that pigeon stuff was all over me. And so, long story short, that was my first impression. I was like, I'm not a chance. And I said, I got a call, would you want to buy the building? And I said, I'm not interested. I go, first of all, if I did want to buy it, it would be, you'd have to take $100,000 off just for the environmental. I don't know, like I'd have to have people with suits come in and clean up all the mess. And you know, long story short is we ended up buying that building, and we renovated it, and it's now Stella's restaurant. It's been that for a while now, and we did a really cool speakeasy downstairs, and it's just a phenomenal building, and we've seen that that's possible in so many of these buildings that we're doing, and we're doing one right now that has probably one of the coolest back of the buildings with the old rock foundation that's 12 feet high, but it's just the solid rock stacked, and we're going to leave it exposed because we just think it will just add so much character to the inside of this space, whatever it becomes. And we have ideas. We're already going, okay, this is how we can program this space.
Let's come back to that in just a second. We're going to take a break.
Okay.
Tired of media bias? Frustrated by political noise? PoliticIt.com cuts through the clutter, giving you real facts, clear analysis, and unbiased insight on the issues that matter most. Stay informed, stay empowered. Whether it's elections, policy changes, or breaking news, we've got you covered. No spin, no agendas, just truth you can trust. Visit PoliticIt.com today, because informed citizens shape the future. PoliticIt.com, where politics meets clarity.
Welcome back to PoliticIt. We're talking to Thaine Fischer. Before the break, we were talking about these buildings that you've been renovating. You started talking about one you're working on right now. Let's talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so the building is 2454 Washington. So we have a tendency to do most of our projects are either on Washington or 25th Street. Those are where we find the most charm and historical buildings. Are still a pretty good inventory. And so it was the old Steve Bailey law firm, and he had been there for, I would say 40, no, more than that, probably 50, 60 years. And he had, for whatever reason, back in the 60s and 70s, there kind of became a new architectural style where they would just put like almost a cement board over the front and board everything up and make it look probably more contemporary. Right. I think that would have been the objective. But they covered up a lot of what that old historical building used to look like. So when we take off that concrete board or facade, we expose what they originally looked like, and then we're so excited because we're going back and we're going to bring that one into, we have a lot of old pictures, and we can, the mason's going to make it look just like the original storefront. Yeah. But in the back of that, once we usually go in and gut the building and kind of get to
so
back.
So you can kind of see
structurally,
right?
There's a lot of structural and seismic items we have to address on these old buildings, make sure that they'll last another 100 years. Right. And so in that one, the back part of it has this incredible rock foundation that was done, literally probably in the late 1800s. And when we were putting in some footings, we found old railroad tracks in the back of the building. And I don't think it was because there was a rail line there. I think it was probably more those railroad ties tracks were used probably for structural purposes. But we find all these little tidbits of history that the building had been added on several times over the last probably 150 years. The Woodmees building next door, I think, was 1858, and this one was built somewhat in that same time period.
So you actually go back and look at the old photos and
absolutely
try to get a good idea
absolutely.
Of what we're missing from that area.
If we can bring it back to as close of what it would represent at that period of time that it had its most significance, because in all honesty, some of these buildings have taken on multiple looks over the last 100, 150 years. But we find the one that we feel is probably the most accurate, and Weber State University has an incredible archive, and we'll reach out and say, hey, if you have pictures of this building, there's a site, Facebook site as well, and it's not, but I follow it. There's a lot of old pictures that are always...
The Ogden memories.
Yeah, something like that.
I remember seeing
that. And so we will look at that, but and people will just send us. I have people that'll say, hey, we know that you have this building, and they'll, my grandmother or somebody had pictures, and they'll take pictures and send them to us. So we try to bring them back to what
and then you have to think about how to repurpose that, right?
Yeah.
What you do with it once you
It's one thing to bring it back and make it look great, but if it sits empty, then financially it doesn't work.
Right.
And so, we have two objectives. One, to bring it back to what we think would be what it originally looked like, and then secondly, how do we program that building, and when we do improve it, what would most likely be successful there? And so that's what I think we've done well. We've really just followed the original architect's vision and design on most of the buildings. We try not to deviate from that, so I don't want to ever take credit for that.
Well, so like the Monarch, I mean, there's a building that was very well designed, but you've created something new with that old building, right?
Yeah, so we took a parking garage and we ended up programming it where you can still go in and see where the parking stripes are within the garage, and ended up making it into a creative space with 41 artist studios. The Monarch venue's private event space that's got about 10,000 feet. We have Weller's Restaurant, we have Ogden Contemporary Arts, we have the Art Box on Ogden Avenue, we have a salon suites concept. So we've been able to take 60,000 feet and program it to where it actually makes money now. Right. But without changing really any of the architectural design. Like, it's literally the original. We left the ramps, we left the openings, we left the windows. Unfortunately, we had to leave the windows from a historical standpoint because they're all single pane, so my utility bill isn't the best.
Right.
We wish we could have put in a double pane, but in order for us to get tax credits, sometimes we just have to adhere to the Secretary of Interior standards, which is fine.
You're glad
if we know the rules, we know the rules. So I'm not complaining about it, but I always shake my head to say, well, if we're really trying to get efficiency, why are we leaving single pane glass in these windows?
Yeah.
But anyways, all that being said, we adaptive reuse. We've won a couple awards at the state level for our adaptive reuse. And we take, I always say we buy bird cages, because when we buy them, they're full of broken windows and birds and raccoons.
Right.
And then we try to turn them into hip urban space.
Right.
And but we do that, trying to follow the vision from the original architect. So
do you study these architects, or is this something where you purposely go after certain architects?
Well, there is a prominent architect, Leslie S. Hodson, that has done some of our most iconic, from the Ogden High School to the Municipal Building, the Monarch, the Bigelow Hotel. Some of our most iconic buildings he's done. We've done 4 or 5 of his projects. The Forest Service building is one of his.
Are you doing that?
No, there's another.
That, right?
The city bought it. We put in for the RFP. We did not win the RFP on that, but the person who did, does great work. So we couldn't be happier. I mean, our goal is, we don't need to do it all. We just want, when people do these and get these buildings, that they do them to the highest and best potential. So, for instance, the old First Security Bank building that was bought by Cache Valley Bank. We couldn't be happier, because
great job. If you look at what they've done in Cache Valley.
Absolutely. I went up there and briefly we talked about my experience up there and on how well they do it. So we love the fact that they got that building, because it's such an iconic building, and that based on what we've seen them do in the past, it's going to be an incredible impact to that block when they're done. And so I couldn't be happier.
There's a lot of history here in Ogden, right? That really needs to be preserved, but it needs to be done in a way where it revives the city, right?
Exactly, and that's we're not a big fan of what we call lipstick on a pig. There's some of these buildings where we have people will buy them and they do the minimal just to get someone in there, and it really doesn't add any value to the community, to the building, etc. So our whole we've been here roughly 10 years in active development. Been here 20 total, but when I say we started probably in 2014, so 10 to 12 years, and we've done 10 to 12 buildings. And so we look at it to say, if there was 10 more of us doing this, we would have done 100 buildings in the last decade. So if you could think of what the downtown Ogden would look like if 100 historical buildings had been renovated to their highest and best potential, it would be a whole different fabric downtown.
Yeah.
And so that's really what we're trying to promote now. It's like, we would love to have other people come on board and say, hey, the water's warm. You can actually, I think we've proved that you can actually invest in our historical buildings. You can see a return on your investment, but also the community impact is massive. And even if it's a small 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 foot building, that impact is still, in my opinion, sometimes even higher than a 100 unit apartment complex.
Right.
And not that I don't like the density downtown. I'm not.
Right.
I'm just saying, if you really look at the significance.
But let's do it in a way. I look at old pictures of downtown Ogden, and when I see what we did with the Ogden Mall,
Yeah.
and what's done a lot of times in cities like this, historical, great cities, right? I mean, world class in a lot of ways, right?
Yeah. Well, if we can, a lot of people, I think there's in my opinion, the notion that it's not cost effective to rehab a historical building. It's better just to tear it down. I would say, what, if you're creative, patient, and that's not the case. In our model, I mean, this is not a nonprofit business. We have investors, and we have to report to them. Our model is that we try to come in 20 to 30% below replacement cost on a new build. So, and then we think that the charm of the historical building adds more value than the new build. So if you have a 10,000 foot building and you're at $3 million for that, and I have a 10,000 foot historical building and I'm at 2.4 million, I think I have an advantage just from a financial standpoint when it comes to rents, but I also think that more people will like my product because of its historical nature than a new build that you just did.
Right.
And so that's always been our model.
Especially when you look at, Ogden and this whole area as a destination.
Absolutely.
It's a very different look at how we do things, right?
Yeah, and when you and I travel, we don't go to places that just have skyscrapers. We try to go to the cool parts of town where you literally have a tendency to find the restaurants and the art galleries and the creative spaces, the museums, and they usually are in these old historical buildings. Yeah. And it brings more, I don't know, it's almost like a connection. Like, it's fun to be connected to our legacy of what was here before.
Yeah, and that doesn't mean everything has to be that way. I mean, some of these buildings have gone to the point where they have been replaced, right? I think of going to Vienna, Austria, and
amazing.
You walk through that city and you see the history, but there's also the new, right?
Yeah, no, and we're seeing that in Ogden. I mean, we've got some incredible projects. Winterblock's coming up. Couldn't be more excited for that project to be successful. That has to occur. We're actually working on another project right now that is the old Cross Brothers building. And that project is, that building was built in 1878. We are the second owner, so we actually bought it from the Cross family.
Wow.
Our goal is to bring it back to its splendor. But around that building, right next to it, to the south, was the Clifton building, the Clifton's Women's Wear. That was renovated, and when I say renovated, there's not much left of what that original building was, and a lot of it had been demoed sometime in the 50s, 60s, or 70s, from our knowledge. And then, there's not a lot with that. So our goal was that we will probably either take down to the ground, or we will significantly...
So you own that building?
Yeah, we do. And so, but we have a plan to combine the Cross Brothers building with a new build, and we work with an architect to say, okay, how do we one, make sure that we don't try to copy the old, because
right.
You really want to have it differentiated.
Right.
So we will put a new concept next to the old building, but tie them together in a way that we think they will be successfully programmed.
Right.
And how that, we obviously need to get parking for them. And there's all the things we have to think about for the end user. But the new is important as well, because not every building, is something that has enough historical significance to save. And then sometimes structurally, it's not possible.
Right. Well, we're about out of time, and I know you've got a meeting to go to, but any parting thoughts?
Well, again, thank you again. It's always great to catch up with you, and I always appreciate you allowing us to have this conversation. But I would really just say that if you have a desire to invest into the architectural legacy of our community, and you have I'd love to talk to you, share my thoughts, buildings that are available, and so on. Because I think that if there was 5 of us doing this for the next 5 to 10 years, we could rehab 40 to 50 buildings in the downtown core, and right up to the Olympics. It would change the downtown fabric considerably while preserving our historical legacy.
Yeah, very good. Thank you, Thaine Fischer.
Thank
See
you.
you guys next week.